The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the last bonus show of 2018, last new bonus show. There will be an episode published on the 31st, but it will be a repeat episode. So remember, you don't need to email me to tell me we published the wrong show. There will be no actual new show on the 31st. And one of the stories that's going to carry over from 2018 to 2019 clearly is the government shutdown. There's every indication that the current government shutdown is not going to end anytime soon. We've mentioned before, and it came up during live calls today, and I don't think we need to go too far into it, but when there are government shutdowns, our elected officials should not get paid. The senators should not get paid. Members of Congress should not get paid. I think it's basically a foregone conclusion, Pat, that that's not something we're going to be able to convince them of, but that should be a starting point for any shutdown.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The fact that only 15% of the government shuts down doesn't incentivize anyone to try to get it back up and running. Something like cutting the pay of federal workers, cutting the pay of lawmakers, that sure would do it.
And I also want to sort of think about the political considerations, because that's the most interesting remaining element of this to me, which is that you have fewer and fewer days left until Democrats are going to be sworn into the House and take control of this next session of the House. They have a pretty big agenda. There are political accomplishments that Democrats want to start pushing. Will they be able to get all of them accomplished? No, but they want to start getting things at least on the agenda. There are investigative powers that Democrats in the House are planning on using. And there is going to potentially be a situation where, as a total distraction from that, both a distraction in media, but also a distraction in terms of their time, they're going to have to be dealing with getting government open back up. Now, I've read a few pieces, Pat, which suggest this is a strategy that Trump and Republicans benefit from keeping government shut down, because it makes it so that when Democrats are sworn in, if the shutdown goes on that long, which would be crazy, but it could happen, their term starts with a government shutdown, and that in some way this is good for Republicans. I don't know how much of the population is that gullible.
I hadn't heard that perspective. I think this is bad for Republicans. I know you talk about sometimes, the government shutdowns are political footballs, much like the debt and deficit conversation. But I think in this particular instance, it's a political football game that the Democrats can win. And I say that for a number of reasons. One, because it started when Republicans had control of everything, right? They should have been able to get the votes in the Senate and the House to pass whatever agenda they wanted to do. Secondly, Trump told Pelosi and Schumer in the Oval Office that if the government shuts down, he would take the responsibility for it. Trump would take the mantle. I don't know what happened to that. And thirdly, wasn't Mexico supposed to pay for the wall? Why are we having this conversation? Why are we having a government shutdown over border security when Mexico is supposed to pay for the wall?
You're completely right. You're completely right about every single one of those elements, except voters have a short memory. Republicans really don't seem to care. And if you look at the polling, yes, 47% of Americans blame Trump for the shutdown. 33% blame Democrats. 33% blame Democrats when Democrats don't control the White House or the House of Representatives or the Senate. If that's what you have right now, just wait. That number only goes up once Democrats get sworn in to control the House. And so that's why I think this is a real concern.
This would be the time for Trump's great negotiation skills to be brought to the table. This is absolutely the time to do it. I don't think there's a way out of it for him. Honestly, I think he's ultimately going to have to cave, especially when the Democrats take control.
It is bizarre, obviously, that the great negotiator couldn't negotiate with Mexico to get them to pay for the wall, which he claimed he would do. He couldn't negotiate with House and Senate Republicans and Democrats to get funding for the wall. He couldn't negotiate to keep the government open. I mean, every single negotiation is failing. The Singapore negotiations with Kim Jong-un were an absolute and total joke. For someone who claimed that his negotiation skills were part of the reason to vote for him, he's really not doing very, very much good negotiation. Interesting story from New York City from last night. There was this electrical flash at a Con Edison substation in Queens, which lit up the New York skyline last night with this brilliant blue color. And a lot of people didn't know what it was. They got very scared. But in fact, it was only an electrical fault that caused what's called an arc flash. There was no fire, despite early reports that there was such a fire. And what's amazing about this story, Pat, it's just an electrical arc flash. I turned on Argentinian TV news this morning, as I often do. They were talking about this story.
Well, yeah, because it impacts a city of 8 million people. People who live in Manhattan and Brooklyn could see the skyline with the blue shades, and it actually looked kind of pretty. I mean, I'm sure if I was there, I'd be concerned what was going on and what was happening with the transformer and why the thing blew up. But if you take a look at the pictures, it does look really cool.
It looks very, very different, that's for sure. And I've been pretty close to some transformer. I guess we would call them explosions. Now, when I say explosion, I don't mean that it bursts into flame. But at my last place in Boston, I once was about a block from an under the sidewalk transformer, which I think the term they use is exploded. There was a very loud boom, and you felt the building shake. I don't know that the building actually shook or it was just like the sound wave that made it feel that way. It's not totally clear. But it led to like a 12-hour power outage and sirens and lights and all sorts of different stuff. It is when something like that happens, when you hear a boom and then all your lights go out and anything that has a power off alarm starts blinking, it very quickly reminds you of how accustomed we are to having electricity and to having it working 24 hours a day, and how quickly things start to go haywire when you lose it.
Yeah, and how bad things can go. Things can ultimately just out of nowhere go completely wrong, and most of us don't really have any recourse because we don't know what we're doing when it comes to that stuff. We have to rely on other people. And I'm sure there were many people in New York City yesterday who thought that the aliens were invading, because if I saw that skyline and didn't have any answers, that's what my mind would go to.
Yeah, it's like Independence Day, except for some kind of January 1st invasion, I guess, instead of a 4th of July invasion, as was the case in the Will Smith, Mary McConnell, Bill Pullman classic movie. Who else was in that? There were a lot. What's the guy's name? What is the guy who plays the scientist?
You referenced this movie last week on the show.
Jeff Goldblum.
Okay.
Jeff Goldblum.
I still haven't seen it.
Yeah, great
Getting
film.
around.
Great film. Silly film, but an entertaining one. That and Blue Chips were two movies that when I was a kid and they were on TV, doesn't matter what I was doing, doesn't matter what I was planning on watching, I get sucked in and I watch those movies. And Shaquille O'Neal's acting job in Blue Chips alongside Nick Nolte, really not a bad film.
Was it better than his acting job in Shazam, where he plays a genie? That was one of my favorite childhood films.
Yeah, I never actually saw that one, but nothing can compare to Michael Jordan's acting job in, I think it was Space Jam.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about cable news. There is very good news for MSNBC. For the first time, I think, ever, or certainly in 18 years, MSNBC's ratings have surpassed those of Fox News. Surprised, Pat?
No, I'm not surprised, because with Trump in office, there's plenty of material to go after him on. And yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
Yep. So it's two things that are going on. Number one, MSNBC is having better ratings. A lot of that is fueled by Rachel Maddow's program. The right is very angry that Rachel Maddow talks about Russia on her show. Apparently, she's not supposed to talk about that. So Rachel Maddow's show is doing very well. Some of the other programs are doing well with the 25 to 54 demographic, which is this crucial demographic to advertisers, because 25 to 54-year-olds are considered to have significant disposable income, not on fixed incomes in retirement, but old enough to have jobs and money and all of that sort of stuff. The other thing is that Fox News is struggling. Fox News lost some of their major shows. Bill O'Reilly, of course, is gone. Greta Van Susteren, I don't know that I would call her old show a major show, but it was a primetime show, nevertheless. That's gone. A lot of shifting around, and Fox News has just suffered a decline. We know the advertising situation is not good over there. So that's what's going on. I do believe that this also has to do with being sort of in an opposition position, even though MSNBC is not left in the exact same way that Fox News is right. I do believe that when you've got a Democratic president, being in the opposition on Fox News is useful, and that when you have a Republican president being seen as being in the opposition on MSNBC, I think that also helps to some degree.
Yeah, and that's exactly why, or at least part of the reason why, left-wing shows in an independent platform like ours are doing so well right now, because it's opposition media, and that just tends to do well. I think it's happening to a lesser degree on MSNBC because liberals in general, I don't think, watch that much cable news. Like, I think they watch the network shows, they listen to NPR, they watch shows like ours. So overall, I mean, over a long period of time, you're never going to surpass the numbers that Fox News gets. But at least for now, it looks like MSNBC is doing quite well.
This is, and they're doing well, but there's a bigger question. I think the more interesting question is it good for the progressive movement for MSNBC to have a bigger audience? And the reason that we would question that would be, yes, MSNBC editorially is to the left of Fox News for sure. It is editorially on the left, we would say, but it is a relatively establishment left with people like Joy Reid, for example, not exactly a bastion of progressivism, and we can come up with sort of other examples. So I think there's a legitimate question to ask, Pat, about whether in the long term the progressive movement benefits from MSNBC holding court with a bigger and bigger audience.
Yeah, some would say it's the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. That may be true, but if so, it's certainly the establishment portion of the Democratic Party. Like, I don't think too many people on MSNBC are advocating for Medicare for all and free college. Maybe that has shifted a little bit, but it's not anything populist left. And it certainly doesn't reflect the viewpoints that we talk about so often on the show here.
No, yeah, I could completely agree with you. So we will see what 2019 brings for cable news. I think that if things get really wacky with Mueller and Trump and the scandals continue, you are going to see a continued shakeup and sort of ups and downs of different media outlets. It will certainly be very good for the David Pakman Show. I think 2017 and 2018 have sort of shown us that. So this does it for 2018. Great stuff planned for next year. What do we need to say, Pat, to close out 2018? I feel like we've really said it all.
Well, I suppose we can report to everyone, just make it official, that the David Pakman Show has indeed been renewed for another season. It's going to be the 15th season of the David Pakman Show, and the entire cast is coming back next year.
You know what's so funny about that season thing? I am surprised. So I'm on Facebook. I'm part of a lot of different podcasting groups, closed groups. So like Stitcher, which is a podcasting app, has a group, and there's all these different ones. I am always surprised when people will post, we're getting ready, we've been off for the last 2 months. We're getting ready for the next season of our show, which is going to be 25 episodes or whatever. Can you imagine if we just had seasons on the David Pakman Show and we were just off for like 3 or 4 months out of the year? It's inconceivable for this type of show to do it, so I never think about it in terms of seasons. But when we submit our program to lots of different platforms, when Free Speech TV submits programming guide information to DirecTV and Dish Network about our show, everything is categorized as seasons. So like, even though we don't think about it that way, we do have seasons, I guess, on the David Pakman Show.
Yeah, and episode numbers too. Like, some news and politics shows do that, where they'll say it's episode 1340 of the Rick Sanders show or whatever. I think that's kind of silly. Like, just put the date. That's all you need.
Yeah. People would be interested to know, I think, if we reported the episode number every show, but we like to keep that private. That's just between us and our affiliate stations.
I don't think we know what that
December
is.
31st. We often don't even know what the episode number is. That's right. Someone else tells us. December 31st, repeat show, no big deal. January 1st, repeat show, no big deal. And then we will be back on January 2nd. Thanks to everybody for supporting the program in 2018. I hope that 2019 will be even bigger and better.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.